Today I'm going to talk about overcoming homeschool burnout or overwhelm and the practical tips that both Carmen Marks and I experienced along our homeschool journeys. So Carmen is a homeschool mom presently of, I believe, 3 kiddos. She'll be able to introduce herself in a moment. And if you're new to me, I'm Teresa Wiedrich. I'm a certified life coach and graduated homeschool mom. And over the last few years, I homeschooled 4 of my kids for about 2 decades, and now I'm in the phase where 3 of my kids are grown up. I only have 1 kiddo who has yet to graduate, and I got to meet a significant someone, one of my kids' special people, this weekend. So that's a whole different phase of mom and parenting than I ever anticipated. Super fun, and I'm so excited for this next phase of parenting. But I remember the story back in my 3rd to 4th year where I felt, as I defined it, overwhelmed. You might explain it as stressed or frustrated or burned out. I've heard many different explanations of this experience. For me, I called it overwhelm. And it was the pivotal story that shifted me towards really looking at how I was engaging myself, what I needed, how I was framing my relationships, how I was really serving myself as well as my kids. And that was a moment in February, what I call a slump month, where it was dark and gray and dull, and I was really tired of the homeschool routine. And I share all about that if you meet me here in the Homeschool Life Coach account, or if you hear me on my Homeschool Mama Self-Care podcast, or if you've read my book of the same name, Homeschool Mama Self-Care. But as I transitioned from graduated homeschool mom, I moved into this certified life coaching space. And so now I walk alongside homeschool moms primarily to help them shed what's not working so that they actually stop doing the thing that is not helping them. They stop pushing through, even though the way they're approaching things isn't working. So instead, to shed what's not working and move toward a more happy homeschool mom space. So that's what I do, typically in one-on-one coaching, sometimes like this morning in a workshop or group coaching programs. And I would love to introduce you to Carmen, because she is a present homeschool mama of a few kids, and she has, over the last few years, had an experience of overwhelm. And I would love for you to hear her story. Carmen, are you there? Hey, nice to see you.
Hi, Teresa. I'm here.
So, Carmen, would you introduce yourself, how many kids you're homeschooling, and a little bit about your homeschool overwhelm story? Or
Yes.
instead, story. Yeah.
Yes. And I like how you introduced that, because I think there's so many ways that you can describe your journey as a homeschool mom. So I actually have 2 children. I have
one more on the way for you.
You know what? It wouldn't be unwelcome. I've been having a lot of conversations lately, so maybe there's something slightly prophetic about that. But I actually have an 11-year-old, 11 and a half-year-old, and a 7-year-old. She'll be 8 very soon. And I actually come from a homeschooling family. So I'm actually a 2nd-generation homeschooler, which is a very interesting dynamic, because just because you were homeschooled doesn't mean that you have everything figured out about being the homeschool mom. So that is my backstory of where I came from. And I knew from my experience as a homeschooled child that this is what I wanted for my kids. So I came into homeschooling right out of the get-go. It was actually a conversation I had with my husband before we even got married. I'm like, we're going to homeschool our kids. So this is a deal breaker. It was that important to me. But we went through some really stressful stuff in life. And that's something I've learned as a homeschool mom. Life still happens, and life happens to you as a person. You know, you aren't just a homeschool mom, you're a person navigating stress and life and challenges. And so a big part of my story of being burnt out maybe isn't even as a homeschool mom or because of being a homeschool mom, it's because of what we faced. I had both my own mom and my mother-in-law face significant health challenges. We were the ones caring for them. We ended up losing both of them 10 months apart. And with that caregiver fatigue and the stress of loss and grief, and I know we're going to get into this in this conversation today, but the lack of self-care, that I took for myself in that season where things were especially difficult, I just felt myself really crashing and burning.
Yeah.
And when you're a homeschool mom and you've got these lives that depend on you for food and clothing and instruction, and you have to show up regardless. And I kind of hit a brick wall where I realized my health was declining and I had to take self-care seriously if I was going to be able to be the homeschool mom that I wanted to be and show up the way that I wanted to show up. And that meant a lot of self-reflection. It meant a lot of evaluating my choices and pivoting. And I would say I'm coming up to 2 years when I really started to make changes.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling such a world of difference. These changes in your thought patterns, in your choices, that doesn't just happen overnight. It's a process.
That is ask me. It's like, okay, tell me what the steps are. And when I work with somebody, I'm very much doing it based on who they are, what they're about, what their story's been. But I have had so many iterations along the way. It hasn't been just this one moment for me. It was the beginning of something at that one. And even as I was listening to a podcast episode that I put out last year on the 14 different ways you can overcome overwhelm, one of the very first ones was all about boundaries and relationships and how you have to actually assess your relationships and say, okay, how am I actually showing up in them? Not just the kids, but your partner or all the important people in your world. And what am I expecting of myself? How am I not really showing up for myself? I mean, boundaries are just like one of many possibilities. But just as you said, homeschool mom life interrupted is everyone's experience at some point.
It is. And you have to almost prepare yourself for that too, by preparing yourself for how you're going to handle those situations. And again, that's something that I had to kind of learn through experiencing it, because it's one thing to be homeschooled and to come in and go, well, I'm not worried about the curriculum, or I don't feel stressed about the teaching time and how long it's going to take me. Those might be valid concerns for a mom who's thinking about home education for the first time, right? Yep. Unlearning the school system and what that looks like. And you don't need 6-7 hours a day. And maybe that's the source of overwhelm for another mom's journey, is her expectations of what she needs to be doing are different. And I think that's why you have to evaluate for yourself. Each person is going to have a different reason why they feel overwhelmed or why they're experiencing burnout. So for me, it wasn't necessarily the mechanics of homeschooling and how much we're going to do, although I've learned a lot of that on the journey. It was that I didn't understand that the hardest part of homeschooling is dealing with your own emotional regulation. Yeah, dealing with yourself and the choices that you are making as a person. Right. And so that was eye-opening for me to go, oh, wait a minute, I'm not a hamster on a wheel that can just run 24 hours a day, taking care of everybody else.
For 2 decades.
Exactly.
That's a lot.
Exactly. And so for me, that was a very big learning curve, was that I actually need to prioritize time for myself and rest and recreation, right? Recreation is, I love the concept of recreation. What are you doing as a homeschool mom that fills you up, right? That, fills your cup, is creative. You're using your gifts or your talents and you feel filled up and you're now able to pour that into your kids. And if you aren't prioritizing that, I guess it comes down to your values, right? Like, what do you value?
Yeah.
Do you value you living a full life and homeschooling out of abundance? Or do you just value, I got to tick off the boxes. I've got to finish the stuff.
Yeah, that's
so
why
I learned that.
Your values, but then you have to ask, are you actually aligning the activities of your day with your values?
Yes, because I used to prioritize the house or other people's requests over the time that I needed, right? Sometimes it's just, our thought processes are what we haven't actually taken time to, well, what am I thinking about this? I'm allowed to, you talked about boundaries. I'm allowed to say, no, I can't take on this commitment because I actually have a date with a book and I'm going to go to the park for an hour and read a book because that's what I need to do to be able to show up for my kids and my husband, right? There's not just my kids in my life. There are other relationships that are important, but I began to realize that my needs and my wellness was a priority that enabled me to actually pour into my kids the way I wanted to.
Yeah,
So
the tricky thing is in the moment. I think this is like a maternal thing where we are always feeling like, but there's like more things that we could do for them. And are we doing enough? And do they feel loved? And, you know, the numerous things that we could be thinking that is an instinct for us. And also, we aren't the only ones loving them, and we aren't going to do everything for them. We weren't meant to, but we are the one person on the planet that really will notice and really does want to do that. For sure, we are the one. And also, you won't be able to accomplish all those things all at the same time. There will come a time where, for my experience, they stop homeschooling, they grow up, they leave your home, and you still have books that you wish you'd read with them.
that's a comfort to me too, because we can't always do everything that we want to do, right? And so I think it's figuring out what is your non-negotiables. I was thinking about this before our conversation. If someone were to ask me, you know, what would you say your top tips to overcome overwhelm? I think the first one would be really figuring out your why. So your non-negotiables of what we achieve each day, or what we, you know, ideally would like
Yeah.
to achieve each day.
Mhm.
And what are things that, you know what, they might have to just be pushed off to tomorrow, or other things come up and we set those aside. So what are your non-negotiables? Make the schedule, tentative schedule that works for that. And then the other side of it is actually scheduling in your wellness
Yeah.
and yourself, because it's easy to plan the stuff for the kids and then make that happen. But as you said, you have to actually schedule in your own wellness and your own time.
Yeah.
Because
Hard
if
to
I
do.
don't,
It
it's
has to
hard.
happen. Mm.
It's hard because, like you said, there's always something else that feels more important. My natural instinct is to put myself down here like I'm okay. I don't need that, you know. And there are certain things. Our children have to eat every day. There's nutrition that needs to be provided for them, you know, but there's also seasons. When you have a newborn baby, that baby has to eat every few hours and you have to wake up and do those things. But as they get older, they can help make the sandwich. They can wait for a minute, you know, and you're teaching them boundaries also, and you're teaching them how to take care of themselves. And so that's something I've learned to communicate to my kids. Part of the daily schedule is mom is going to do her morning routine. I have some quiet time. You know, I'm going to take my supplements. After the school day is done, I've got a workout. This is 20 minutes that I'm in the basement. You can't come interrupt, because they're big enough
Yeah.
now. We're in a
Yep.
season they can wait, and they, right? But if I had to work through that, you
Yes.
know, as a mom, I had to work through saying this is really important. And now my kids know. They know that fitness is important, and, you know, time with by yourself is important. And so I think I'm actually modeling for my
Yep.
kids what
Mhm.
adulthood looks like. So yes, it is for me, but I think it's also creating a pattern in my kids' lives that they also need to
Yep.
see. So
And if we back what you were saying earlier, you're talking about the hardest part is us and how we're framing things, or as the common culture refers to it, triggers, which I think should be reserved for the PTSD space, but we all know what that means. And so our reactivity speaks to what it is that we need to address. And actually this week in the Homeschool Mama Book Club, we're reading the book, I don't know if you've read this one, The Awakened Family by Shefali Sabri.
I haven't, but I should write that down.
It's
Yeah.
good. I have reading lists for personal growth and relationships and homeschooling, and I can't remember what else. I read a lot. I still read. I can try even to read aloud to my kids still. But I have this one book that I would say, Shefali Sabri's book. It's Tsabury, The Awakened Family. That book I think should be at the top of the list, because that is what it's talking about. You're not in control of your kiddos. You are not, you don't have to live your life in reactivity to everyone around you. You can learn your triggers by paying attention to yourself when you're a homeschool mom, because you are invited to the journey. You will be invited to the journey if you haven't figured it all out now. There comes a time where you're like, okay, I'm irritated all the time. I'm losing my marbles all the time, or else I'm withdrawing and leaving my kids to go to my room to cry in the closet, or some version of something, when we have these triggers that we're not addressing. And they don't happen because we had kids. They
Yes.
get unearthed they get unearthed because we had kids.
It's not just our kids learning on the homeschool journey, us learning. And if we can be transparent with our kids too, where, we're able to say, I'm sorry and forgive me and I'm learning, and being transparent, we don't have to have it all figured out.
We can't. That's
We
not, yeah, it's not even part of the journey.
can,
The journey is for us on the journey alongside them differently. Yeah.
yes. Yeah. And I think that's the beautiful part about it too, is that we are changing alongside our kids and who we're becoming on the journey too. And
Exactly.
sometimes decisions have to be made. When I came to that point on my burnout journey, I was also working outside the home,
Yeah.
and I had to step down and say, you know what? I'm going to let that go in my life right now because it wasn't serving me anymore emotionally, even though it maybe was 7 years before when I started, but because of all the things that happened, that wasn't serving me, and it wasn't serving my kids either. And I'm now able to take the time that was spent going out of the house to work, and I was able to have a more emotional bandwidth, I think is how I would describe it, to then do work on myself in that time and really understand what I needed. And part of it was just setting boundaries,
Yeah.
and making my priority. But what was underlying, you talk about where's that coming from, was the thought pattern, right? Was like looking at the thoughts of, well, resentment or feeling overwhelmed or feeling like, why am I always doing this? And I thought, well, because actually it starts with me. If
Yes.
I'm always feeling like I'm overwhelmed and I don't have time, then I need to make time for myself.
Are you probably Enneagram too as well? Am I right?
Say that again.
Are you familiar with Enneagram? I'm wondering if you're an Enneagram. Like,
Yeah.
yes, me too.
Yeah. So
Welcome to
yeah.
space.
Yeah. And it's really freeing when you realize you can't actually put that blame on other people, because you are actually making those choices to not value your time and value like your own wellness,
Yeah.
right? And man, when you're kind of a driven person, I know there's other moms who are probably watching that relate to this. When you're like the type A and you're driven and you just feel like, you can handle anything. I think I thought I was invincible. Like I didn't need self-care. I could handle everything. And my body actually said to me, no, wait a second. If you're not going to stop, I'm going to make you stop.
Yeah.
And
Sarah,
yeah,
familiar with her from Read Aloud Revival
man,
podcast?
I am not. These are people I need to be listening to.
To her. She's beautiful. She's such a lovely spirit. She loves read alouds, and she made an entire podcast on it. But I interviewed her on my, and she said, and she's similar age as I am and has similar aged kids as I do. And she said, I did not see that I was a human alongside my kids. I just was not recognizing my humanness. And that's why I always say that you have to recognize that you're a human too. And it
Yeah.
seems so obvious, except it's not, because that is not how a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us roll, is we just keep doing the thing we think we're supposed to be doing. We don't even ask why. And then we don't feel the things that we need, like the basic things. And then we feel agitated and resentful. And what is wrong with you kids? You're asking for food again? And you're like, oh, wait, maybe they will be. Yeah, we have to do something about it.
I actually made a reel using that language, and I've not heard her podcast. I made a reel about, the biggest realization for me as a homeschool mom is that I'm a human too.
Yeah,
Too.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing innately wrong with that. And I want my children to grow up understanding that about themselves, then that's something that I need to go on a journey of, right? So that I can understand it and model it for my kids too, because I don't want to just keep creating the same pattern generation after generation, right? Even as like, I love being a second generation homeschooler, but if that is flowing out of, a place of resentment or burnout or exhaustion, then I don't want to pass that on to the next generation of homeschoolers either. We can actually homeschool out of abundance. I mean, that's like a revelation in itself.
So what were the practices then that you included so that you could actually look at your patterns? Like how did you slow that down so you had time to really look at what was going on?
Yeah. I think the first thing was saying no to the things in my life that kept me on that hamster wheel so that I didn't have time
Yeah.
to dig into. So a big part of that was stepping down from the job that I had to create more space in my life to deal with those things. And then I actually started really practically with things like supplementation. Like I was depleted physically. And so I just started being more aware of what I was putting in my body, what I was eating. You know, that's a journey too, right? You can't implement everything at once because that's just a new level of overwhelm, right? Someone's like, you know, yeah, like now all of a sudden you have to work out every day and change how you cook everything. I'm like, I just want to give up. Nope, I don't want to do that. So I started really slow with making small changes that I think really benefited my mental wellness right out of the gate. So then I had what I call more emotional bandwidth to be able to go, okay, now I can make other healthy choices because I have some more space in my life. And so that's when I started, you know, looking at just walking every day, just a simple habit of walking every day. For me, like my faith is an important part of my life. And instead of saying, well, when I get time, I'll sit and have some quiet time, it was, no, that's going to be a part of my morning routine. And so I actually looked at a lot of these healthy habits and I kind of created myself a morning routine. And I share that too with other homeschool moms. It's really simple. Just wake up and don't touch your phone right away. Like, don't pick up the phone. Don't engage with the world right away. Have your quiet time. I drink my lemon water. I take my supplements. I make sure I'm having lots of protein because when I'm hangry, I am not able to show up as the mom that I want to be. And so just fueling myself, you know, and that sets me up for success in the day. And then I'm still a work in progress, but I'm learning to say no to things that don't serve me or my family. I'd love to commit to 3 field trips a week and, you know, doing more service, but I'm like, I can do one activity a week with the kids and we plan for something. And if I'm going to volunteer or I'm going to do something, I'm going to look at what's on the family schedule and maybe do one thing in a school year and maybe even season.
Popular blog post that I had for years was about solitude for children,
Mm,
based on by Maya Angelou. And that we don't take the freedom of that solitude or create margins in our days as we could.
mm.
And I that it feels like, oh, but there's this thing and it's so cool and it wouldn't be great for the kids to be exposed to. And I completely understand that. I've been there. I've been there, but then I went to the overwhelm. But I remember thinking, but I might never see this thing again. Reality check is that some kids love it. They'd be like, yeah, I'm on all day long. I'm great. And then there's other kids that are like, I don't want to go anywhere. And then you're worried about their socialization, just like everybody else is. But reality check, they don't actually want that level of interaction. So it's not actually favorable. When kids don't get solitude, they bicker, they complain more. They're frustrated. It's not more fun for you trying to drag kids to places or do things. So yeah, we need to really look at that. Our, like you said, bandwidth or creating margins in our days so that we can actually have nothing times to do nothing.
Yeah. I, I had a young homeschool mom. I'm almost in tears over how busy my schedule is. You know, like they're running from thing to thing
Yep.
and going, it's too much. And I think when your body starts to send those signals, whether it's the feelings of overwhelm or for me, it's the thoughts. When I start to have the thoughts, I have to go, okay, I know my feelings come from my thoughts. So my thoughts are telling me, you know, I can't handle this or it's too much. So maybe I just need to stop. I need to say, nope, we're not going to do that, or we're going to take a break, right? And I think if you're so busy that you don't have time to reflect on what's not working, then that's your body also giving you a bit of a warning, right?
The first thing I started group coaching in was overwhelm.
Mm.
And in the beginning, I couldn't have anybody would not sign up for the overwhelm group coaching because they would say, I'm too overwhelmed. I don't have time. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I get it. So let me know when you're ready. Because when you're ready to actually change something here, you need to actually stop.
That is so key when you're ready to change.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, you know, it depends how deep we want to get here in self-reflection, but sometimes we are content with the chaos
Yeah,
because
that's
we don't
true.
have to deal with things.
Yes.
We don't have to deal what's really going on inside of us
Yeah.
if it's just crazy all the time. And then it's easy to say, oh, well, my schedule is too much, or right, I don't have time. The reason I'm snappy is because I have too much responsibility.
Right.
Yeah, we do have responsibility, but we actually have a choice,
Yeah.
right? To say, I had to make a decision like this last week. Someone wanted to kind of have an accountability partner relationship with me about something. And I had to be honest and say, I can't take on anything else of life. And the answer was no. I can't be that person for you in season. And it's hard, right? Because oftentimes we want to please other people or we don't.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a big one for me. Or let other people down. But then something else has to give now in your priorities and in your values. And it's out of alignment. You're going to feel that too. So I think this is the meat of the work, like the hard work that we have to do as homeschool moms. It's easy to say, oh, well, we just need to change the curriculum, or,
Oh, yeah, that's not it. You're just spending money you spend. I guarantee you, that's not it. Yeah.
yeah. And
Come to
for,
my house. I've got a lot.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, we just switched curriculum and it's working great. There are things that you just have to switch up and change. But a lot of times it's the inner work that we have to do.
Right. Once upon a time, like this, again, like you and I said, sometimes it's not about homeschooling at all. It's about life in general.
Mm.
And when I have conversations with a variety of women, I mean, I can't specifically speak about their stories because it's their stories, but the things that they're challenged with, it's not just the deschooling element. It's not just leaning into child inspired learning, though that can be a really significant element, shifting mindset around education. But it is definitely about how they show up in relationships and what they expect of relationships, or, the unhealed stuff that they didn't deal with parents, their own parents, or significant things that happened when they were young, or their emotions, even feeling their emotions. Sometimes it's not even just they're big emotions, but it's actually knowing what they feel at all, and they checked in with that. And when you don't do that, when you don't check in with your emotions, it's going somewhere, because emotion is energy in motion. And so you experience anxiety or overwhelm or depression or physical issues or something, but those emotions are going somewhere. All of that to say, there's whatever we're dealing with before we even went into the family life or into the homeschool family life, it's coming up somehow, some way for us to address.
And that's actually such an important work to do, right? Like that's part of raising kids and being in family. Like homeschooling just isn't about math and science and language arts,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes it's easy to say, well, we ticked off the academic boxes, but we're not just raising kids that have academics, right? Like that's, for me, it's like the values that I want my kids to have in their character and in their faith and how they treat other people. And we're doing good work when we just sit and have a conversation about our feelings, or when I can be vulnerable and say, you know what, mommy was acting really irritable and I lost my patience, and I just want to tell you, what I was thinking at that time and what I'm going through, so that you understand it doesn't make it right. But I'm trying to work through something, and I think that we're just gonna put the math away for the rest of the day and mommy's gonna work on this. I've had to learn to do that. That's not a failure of a homeschool day. Like that is a success, that we could talk about those things. And if I'm able to work on myself that way, then I'm able to help my kids when they are emotionally struggling with something, right? Or when they're overstimulated. Because I've noticed this trend, like I'm overstimulated, so my energy's feeding on them. They're,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
it's like, right? We're not, is anybody even listening to the math lesson? Probably not. Like we're not even achieving what we want to achieve there. We've got to deal with what's going on. And I think that's brought a lot more peace into the homeschool, because my thoughts around it have shifted. So I'm less stressed about completing the math lesson that day and more about, what does it feel like to be together when we homeschool?
I've really learned, just like everything that you're saying, these are the things that I've come to understand. It's not really about homeschooling. The challenges aren't usually about homeschooling. the challenges are what's going on inside of us, and also building an acceptance of our emotions. And therefore, if we accept our own emotions, we're more likely to accept our
Mm,
kids' emotions, and the energy decreases rather than does what you were just sharing, gets harried or
yeah.
more harried. Accepting the emotions, studying our own patterns, understanding what our backstories are that are contributing to our patterns, and accepting again, and then saying, okay, how can I make shifts? What can I actually do to, say, for me, 11 a.m. every day, I still to this day on my phone have a reminder that says to stop, breathe.
Mm.
So I put my hand on my heart and I take a deep breath in, and then I just say, how are you doing? Are you okay? What's going on for you? And if I'm feeling big emotions, and then I'm asking myself, so what's the thought behind the feeling? Like, what was the originating thought? What's the story that I'm creating from that thought? Is there a different way to think about it? There always is. It's not my default setting, but there always is. And then to ask myself, if I believe the thought that I had before, is it making things harder for me right now? Or if I chose an alternate perspective, would that make it different for me? How does that influence everything? So even just a mindfulness moment each day has a huge shift in the trajectory of what's going on in my home.
And that's a tool. Like, I feel like what you're talking about is the thought model from Brooke Castillo. I don't know if you're familiar with her,
No,
but
but I don't.
I've yeah, I've used the thought model, and it's literally like, you print out the sheets, and it's like T is the thought and F is the feeling, and then it's the circumstance. C is the circumstance. Circumstances we can't change. We don't have control over the circumstance, but we do have control over the thought that we think from the circumstance, and that usually leads to a feeling and then an action and a
Yeah,
result. And so if you don't like the result that you're getting, you can actually reverse engineer that. This has been a tool that I found very helpful for
it's
me.
very similar to what I was taught.
It's
Yeah,
exactly what you're just describing
yeah,
to me. You can actually reverse engineer it and go, okay, well, my feelings are coming from what I'm thinking. And
yeah.
so I can actually choose a different thought about this circumstance, and maybe just get curious, curious about what it could be instead. What could I replace that thought with? If the thought is, I'm always doing this, or I find any thoughts that are extreme in nature are probably not true thoughts. They're probably stories I'm telling myself. But could I reframe that thought into something that actually changes what I'm feeling in the moment?
That's right.
Have control over that too, right? I'm not a victim to my thoughts, and I can
Yeah,
shift the energy in the room.
I know, Carmen, that when I've been in the big emotions, when I've had these really big emotions, I'm like, no, there's only one way to think, and it's that so and so shouldn't have done such and such, or this shouldn't have happened, or whatever. And so it's hard for me to know. I know now, but it was hard for me to know that there is an alternate way of thinking. And what I point people to often is, if you're partnered or if you have a best friend and they don't think identically to you, that's your sign. If you've been with them long enough, then you know that they don't always think the same way that you do. And they definitely have different perspectives on this stuff. So then, maybe their way of thinking about it would be useful, but knowing that somebody else has an alternate perspective helps us to recognize that just because we think it doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's why we need community around us too. Like, even the conversation we're having right now, just to have kind of step into your world and help you think about something differently and evaluate it. Or even just to tell you, when your brain is telling you that nothing is going right and you're not doing anything right, to have someone come and say, you're actually doing a great job.
Yeah.
And all things are going so well, and just having that outside perspective, I think, can help you reframe your thinking about your.
Do you know the very first thing I gave away, by the way, was a thought care checklist?
Oh,
The very, and it came from, I don't know if you know Dr. Daniel Amen, change your brain, change your something. That's not very helpful. He's,
we're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, this kind of stuff. And it was huge for me when I realized that my thoughts are the precursor for my feelings. And so if that be so, then I can actually look at the thoughts and consider, let's slow this thing down and actually look what's going on. But I actually am offering an overwhelmed, I don't know that this is a clever name, but it's essentially an assessment for overwhelmed homeschool moms to assess your overwhelm. So if you want that, let me know. But what was I going to say? And I did an entire podcast season just on overwhelm because this is such a recurrent discussion. Although I've learned people call it burnout or stress or frustration or, you know, homeschooling. Sometimes they just call it homeschooling.
Yeah. And it doesn't, I've had people tell me that, well, I could never homeschool because they come with the assumption that homeschool means you're always, overworked or overwhelmed, right? So it's like,
Where that's true. So then we have to figure out how to not do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Happy, not because it's right or wrong, but just so you can be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is actually so important to just live it, with joy with your family.
Love
Yes, there's hard stuff. We're always going to navigate hard things, but I don't know if I heard this somewhere or a homeschool mom friend mentioned it to me, but how do you want your kids to feel about their homeschool? And that was a bit of an eye opener too. I think our kids can feel our energy if we're just trying to rush through something and get them to tick the boxes.
Yeah.
Versus taking time to really enjoy the process of discovery with them and understand their minds and how their minds are working and to see that growth. And when we're able to care for ourselves enough that we can step back and almost be like an observer of what's going on with our kids,
yeah,
instead of driver of it always needs to be like,
yeah.
and I felt like
Yeah.
this year has been, I feel the last 2 years has really been a journey of healing for all of us and what it looks like. But especially as we started this new school year, I'm feeling a totally different energy around the schooling than I even was, a year or two ago.
So how
And
many years into homeschooling now?
so it's like 8 years. It's like 8 years because my son is technically doing grade 6.
Yeah.
Now, the strange thing about my journey, though, is that when I started, it was just easy peasy. Like being a second generation homeschooler, we just read aloud.
Yeah.
We just so fun. And I didn't feel any overwhelm or burnout around homeschooling. It was just, and you have little kids, right? So it's the early years. And my son just flourished in all the things I gave him to do. And and then you add a second child in who learns very differently and needs different things. And then you add all the life things I started talked about, and everything just snowballs. And then you realize, okay, homeschooling is just, it's like a to-do list and it's stressful. And where did the joy go? That's when I had to do all the inner work that we just talked about and the values and relearning. I feel like I've relearned the homeschool journey, Yeah.
Beautiful. Year 8, so I spent so much time with women from all over the place homeschooling, and I knew that 3 to 4, like year 3 to 4 is a common year where people hit a wall of, okay, I'm good, I'm done. This is too much. I'm either doing it differently or the kids got to go to school or something,
Yeah.
And then somewhere by year 8 is when people are like, you know what, I'm good. We're going to do it my way. I'm happy. Done.
Yeah.
Yes. Wild to hear that.
I think that's kind of maybe my trajectory as well. And
That's it.
bumps along the road too. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I actually offer gentle accountability. So I don't know if it pertained to the person you're speaking to or if there's an entirely different zone of life. But that's what I do in my Confident Homeschool Mom Collective. And like throughout the week, you essentially have coaching in your back pocket with your phone. But on Fridays, I meet with women at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time every week. And Michelle just said the most beautiful words. She said, I love the safe space that you created for people to be real and authentic. And I just love it. I wish I had this way back when. I really do, because it was hard doing it alone.
Yeah. And you don't, we don't want to have to do it alone. Like if there's someone like yourself offering that resource, like that is so beautiful. Like plug into that. Don't try to do it alone. Because there are so many people that have come before with your years of experience that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? We don't have to learn everything by experience. We can also learn through others' experience. And I think that's not just your experience as a homeschooler, but the work that you put into it and the training, thought work, the reading, right, can benefit so many women. So that just really excites me.
It's fun.
Seeing women flourish.
Schooling. I just want to stay homeschooling. That's what it is.
But you kind of are, in a sense. Learning a lot
learning school
with
moms.
other women.
I'm
Yeah.
learning you all in ways that I'm like, whoa, like this is research. I should be writing this down. Oh, wait, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's super fun.
But I think that's one of my greatest joys too, and why I feel like I want to keep showing up in this space on Instagram is just I want to be able to just offer encouragement and help women to find joy. That's why my account is Joyful Homeschool. Like it can actually be joyful,
Yeah.
and it can be the most rewarding years of your life for you and for your kids. You know, we never stop learning. So you know, I've just gone back to school. I'm in grade 6 and grade 3, but and I'm also in grade, how old am I? 39, right? So that's the
Yeah,
beautiful part about being a homeschool mom.
it
Yeah.
is beautiful. It's a very fun life. You get to relearn all sorts of things. I did top out in grade 9 math. I'm good. After that, I don't know what's going on still, despite having 4 kids graduating or 3 kids graduated already. But I'm okay with that. Happy with that.
There's resources and tools for all of that stuff,
Yeah.
right?
If
Yeah.
I just want to do grade 10 to 12 math,
Yeah.
I won't. Okay, actually, I could do it, but I won't do it. I probably would go to Khan Academy, maybe Steve Demi from Matthew C, but I'm good.
Yeah. Love
So,
Matthew.
is there so you're on Threads, you're on Instagram,
Yes.
and do you have a website as well?
I don't have a website. No, maybe in the works someday. I'm like so open to see where my journey's going to take me. I'm kind of in the thick of homeschooling, but I feel like I'm able to be a resource to other moms and
You
share
feel
the
like
tools.
to me.
Yeah,
You have that inspirational, encouraging stuff. So, hey, hang around with me because
yeah.
I
Maybe
actually
one day.
like there's certain homeschool moms that are coaching or learning coaching, and
Yeah.
I like doing that too. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, you feel like a cheerleader, an encourager. So I'm so glad you're here in this space and we're sharing it together.
And thank you for allowing me to come in
Oh yeah.
today and share. Hope it was an encouragement to everybody that listened, and they can take something from what we've talked about and just apply it today. You know, something they can just take, and even if it's just encouragement to keep going. My son said something today that like just touched my heart so much. It almost made me cry. We're sitting down to work one-on-one together. He goes, "Mama, I'm just so happy that I'm homeschooled. I just love doing this with you." And you know, it just makes all the work that you put in on yourself and in the journey worth it, because that's the most precious use of my time and of my life, to be with my kids and hear them say that.
Story. And actually, on that note, would you believe that I'm in the place where kids are bringing special people back home, which is wild for me. And I should actually get going because they're home right now and they're only home till
Yes,
tomorrow.
you
And also, I'm
could.
outside sitting in the snow.
Yeah.
That's how motivated I am to get good sunlight here.
Yeah.
If you come back here, let me know because we want to have coffee together in real time.
Yes, I would love that. I have to plan for
Yeah, it was such a pleasure chatting with you, Carmen.
you too, Teresa. Thank you for having me.
Okay, everybody have a great week, and we'll see you next week at the Homeschool Mom Chat, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here. So have a beautiful week. Mwah. See you, everybody.